I quoted the Trilateral Commission view of the educational system, namely it's a system of indoctrination of the young. And I think that's correct. It's a system of indoctrination of the young. That was the way the liberal elites regard it, and they're more or less accurate. So the educational system is supposed to train people to be obedient, conformist, not think too much, do what you're told, stay passive, don't cause any crises of democracy, don't raise any questions, and so on. That's basically what the system is about. Even the fact that the system has a lot of stupidity in it, I think, has a function. You know, it means that people are filtered out for obedience. If you can guarantee lots of stupidity in the educational system, you know, like stupid assignments and things like that, you know that the only people who make it through are people like me and like most of you, I guess, who are willing to do it no matter how stupid it is, because we want to go to the next step, you know. So you may know that this assignment is idiotic and the guy up there couldn't think his way out of a paper bag, but you'll do it anyway because that's the way you get to the next class, and you want to make it and so on and so forth. Well, there are people who don't do that, you know. There are people who say, I'm not going to do it, it's too ridiculous, you know. Those people are called behavioral problems, or something like that. They end up in the principal's office or in the streets or selling drugs or whatever. And all of this is a technique for selection for obedience. And I don't know how to prove this, but I have a feeling that when you go to the elite universities, you find more obedience and conformity, probably because you're getting the students who were better able to do it, you know. Well, all of that is functional. That's the way it works. And it works right through graduate school. I mean, by the time you get to graduate school, it's already a little more varied because some real contradictions develop in the system. The problem is that you can't have progress this way. You know, now especially in the sciences and engineering, that's a problem because the corporations need science and engineering. You know, if you don't have innovation, you're really in trouble. So they have to encourage creativity and independence, because you can't get anywhere if you just copy what somebody told you. You have to be challenging things all the time, challenging everything, you know, and thinking new thoughts and so on. And there you got a real contradiction. It's hard to train people to be creative and challenging and so on, and yet to ensure that somewhere else in their lives they're conformist and obedient and never think. So you have problems.
You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students. Hitler wanted to control the education system in Germany. Stalin did in Russia, Mao Zedong in China. You have to get a hold of the minds of the young, where you break the person's values. You break their understanding of their individuality. You bring them to consensus with the group. They become a member of the collective. It's Soviet education, basically. Might as well say it. It's Soviet education. You cannot expect to have a smoothly running world socialist system if you have people out there who are going to object to what you're trying to do. So you have to brainwash.
If you sat around a table and you said, right, what we need to do is we need to find some way of getting young people to see the world the way we want them to see it, so that by the time they become adults, they are completely following the reality we want them to believe in. Someone might say, well, they might not have it but you know the ideal thing? What we do is we have a system where we take children away from their parents at least 5 days a week, all day, from about the age of 4 and 5, and we have control of their minds until they're about 17, 18. That would be ideal. Well, of course, that's what happens. Yeah. It's called the education system. Yes. And it's indoctrination.
Schooling is a form of adoption. You give your kid away to a group of strangers. You accept a promise, sometimes stated and more often implied, that the state, to its agents, knows better how to raise your children and educate them than you, your neighbors, your grandparents, your local traditions do. And that your kid will be better off so adopted. By the time the child returns to the family, or has the option of doing that, very few want to. Their parents are some form of friendly stranger too, and why not? In the key hours of growing up, strangers have reared the kid. Now let's look at the strangers, of which you were one and I was one. Regardless of our good feeling toward children, regardless of our individual talents or intelligence, We have so little time each day with each of these kids, we can't possibly know enough vital information about that particular kid to tailor a set of exercises to that kid. So what we do is accept, and of course if we don't accept this, we're fired or harassed. We accept a state's prescription that's written in manuals. You do this first, and this second, and this third. And the way the state checks on whether you've followed that diet is there's standardized tests given at intervals. If your kids do badly, it does not mean that they're bad readers or anything else. It means that they haven't been obedient to the drills the state set down, and they're marked for further treatment later on, or they're marked to be excluded from responsible jobs. Perhaps some ways by being excluded from the colleges that lead to responsible jobs, in other ways from the licenses that lead to responsible jobs. This was all worked out. It didn't evolve by a lot of rational people saying, we'll take this, this, and this from the past, then the next generation will take this, this, and this. This was set down largely in a handful of places.
I think it's important to understand that most of the educational programs that are implemented in the United States stem from the National Education Association. And the NEA was actually founded by John D. Rockefeller. And John D. Rockefeller, I think, voiced the beliefs of this ruling elite that wants to try to homogenize our education system when he was quoted as saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." So I think the education system is not only pushing people into a socialized version of government, but also dumbing the individual down to the point to where he'll be a good worker in the factory, or he'll be a good worker in Silicon Valley. He may know a lot about computers, but he is not going to have a classic education that would allow him to take all of the facets of the culture and the society and put it together and really form an intelligent opinion as to what's really going on and what might be in the best interest of the individual.
Now let's shift to the basis of your question, which is Rockefeller and Carnegie and J.P. Morgan. These people saw a different kind of utopia. They thought that this material abundance, since they had abandoned a belief in a creator or an afterlife, this material abundance was the best that a human life could aim for. And to do that, the family had to be moved off center stage, and the children had to be processed like raw materials. These are the people who saw to it with their influence that when legislation that was wildly radical based on any past model was proposed, that the right legislators would vote that legislation through. They saw to it that money was available to build these vast piles of brick and stone and to drain children out of the community by the force of law, mind you, because they don't teach the way children learn, nor can they teach the way children learn. That's not what they're set up to do. They're set up to produce a predictable, homogeneous, safe product. They're set up to sort people into occupational categories, roughly consonant with what the current economy demands.
The whole system, because we have two hemispheres of the brain, the left brain, which is about words and this world reality and, you know, the perception of this reality. We have the right brain, which is where you get creativity, inspiration, and connection, and then you've got this corpus callosum, which connects the two. First of all, we use a fraction of our brains. Why is that? And the other thing is that what the system does is it turns out left brain prisoners. They run the system. And it does it by putting information through schools and colleges and universities into the left brain, which it then says at time of an exam, give me all that back. And if you tell me what I've told you well enough to believe, then you'll pass the exam and you'll be very successful. Anyone that takes that information into the right brain and puts their spin on it, or questions it, or sees through it, and puts that in the exam, they are perceived as a disruptive influence in the classroom.
Yes, they are.
And so what happens is, for you to become a doctor, overwhelmingly a politician, a journalist, someone often in industry, all these areas that control the system.
The professions.
The professions,
Yeah.
lawyers,
Yes.
I mean, on we go. You have to have gone through your young life constantly taking information into your left brain and regurgitating it out on exam papers. To become a teacher, you have to go through that process. Then you go through teacher training college, where you're taught how to do it to others, and then you're let loose on the children.
Yes.
The whole system is run by left brain prisoners. And if you look at the school system, things like music and art that stimulate this side of the brain, the uniqueness, they are constantly cut back in favor of left brain curriculums. And this is systematic. I have to get this over to people. This is not systematic at the level of, people who administer it into reality. It is coldly calculated in the shadowy areas where these concepts first come from.
Yeah.
And they know what they're doing.
A lot of the constraints on us, a lot of the strings that hold us like puppets are really inventions of our own mind. I'm not saying that there aren't armies and police and various ways to punish deviants, but there isn't any way to punish a large number of deviants. There isn't any way to do that. It's too expensive to even try to do it unless you can colonize the minds of children growing up so they become their own police. And they will report other children who are deviating.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all, at all, at